Actual Fluency Podcast, episode 28, with Victor Berrjod from Norway, who talks about learning Asian languages and gold listing.
Welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast, the podcast that gives you the tools and inspiration to learn languages faster and more efficiently. And now your host, Chris Broholm.
Hello everyone and welcome back. It's another Actual Fluency Podcast and I am so excited. Why am I excited? I'm excited because the podcast is going out on time. And as you know, the week before last week, I had a bit of a problem. I was sick. My guest was sick. Then there was technical issues. I couldn't get the podcast out on a Friday at 8 p.m. CEST. And I was so sad about it because I've been doing it for 27 weeks. So I felt that was a bit of a ritual. But today I'm ready. I'm pumped. We're back in action. We're back in action. That sounds better. And today I'm joined by Victor Berrjod, a Norwegian who I met in Berlin. And Victor is really, really interesting because he decided to go the Asian language route, and even though he's from Norway, and today he's very, very fluent or has a high level of knowledge in, Japanese, Mandarin, Cantonese, and Korean. So, he's got the big four, so to speak, covered. And it's really interesting to talk to him. And I actually talked to him on a few occasions regarding this interview because we had some technical problems. We had to re-record it. And that's why this one you're hearing is actually the third kind of interview with him I'm doing. So we hope that we've kind of distilled it down to the best parts. And it's no coincidence that I used the word distill, which you'll hear in the episode as well. And that's because we mentioned the gold list method for vocabulary learning. And if you've been following the blog, you would be seeing that I've reviewed it before, the method. It didn't work for me, but as in the episode, you'll hear me and Victor talk about it. And that's about it, basically. Before I let you on to the interview, I just want to give a quick shout out to the episode sponsor, which is Audible. And Audible is offering a free audiobook to you guys. So just go out and check it out at audibletrial.com/fluency. You can also find it at actualfluency.com/book if you prefer going that way. But they're basically offering you a free audiobook, and they are the biggest audiobook provider in the world, 150,000 titles. And, in this day and age, I just can't sit down and read a book. I get distracted too easily. So what I do is just get audiobooks instead. And they have a very affordable membership option if you decide to stick with them after the free book offer. But for now, just check out the free book offer. They have books in tons of languages and of course mostly in English, but there are many interesting topics about business or even fiction if you're into that kind of stuff. So audibletrial.com/fluency. And now it's time for the interview with Victor Berrjod. Enjoy. All right, everyone. Today I've got a very special guest. My guest today is Victor Berrjod, who is from Norway, and he's a linguist or studying to become a master of linguistics at the University of Oslo. And he's very interested in language learning and vocabulary learning as well. So let's welcome onto the show, Victor. How are you doing today?
Very well. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I need to, before we begin, I need to say that this is our third attempt at recording this. And before even getting to recording it, we've spent weeks planning it as well. And Victor has to take refuge at his mother's place to record this, which I'm very grateful for, by the way, Victor. Thank you so much for
no problem.
taking the time and the effort. And, of course, technical problems happen, and we did an original recording, and I didn't quite watch the time, and then all of a sudden I got a Skype call that I couldn't ignore, and we kind of had to rush it, and we didn't like how it felt, me and Victor, so we re-recorded it, and 20 minutes into the call drops, and the recording corrupts, so we can't use any of that either. So we're back, and now we're here. Now we're really sure of what to say. We almost got a script. But we'll of course try to make it as good as the previous recordings, or even better. But the first thing that people probably are interested in, Victor, is probably, how do you develop as a language learner from the school where you got introduced to probably English, and then how you move on through high school and middle school as well. So if you just want to take a second to talk about your personal language history.
Yeah, well, as all kids, I started with English in school, and then we got the option to select a second foreign language in middle school. So I took French. And I kind of fell in love with language learning. I had a teacher who was somewhat of a polyglot himself. So he was kind of inspiring for me.
Yeah, that always helps, doesn't it?
It does.
Inspirational.
And then in high school, we could select a second foreign language. So I did some Spanish. And in the last year of high school, I found out that I could actually get like the points or credits that I needed from studying languages on my own. Because they scheduled all of the language courses at the same time, so you couldn't really study more than one at once, but you could study on your own and still take the exam.
Oh, okay. So you got some free points that way.
Yes, I had a friend who I could speak German with, and so and my friend was kind of a grammar geek as well. So if I had questions about grammar, I could always ask. And I had studied some Old Norse as a hobby. I never learned to speak it, but just learned to read it. And the grammar there was really similar to German, so that helped a lot.
Yeah, right. And what kind of level did you get these European languages to? Because I know you're more of into Asian languages, but what kind of language level do you consider yourself in these languages today?
Well, just very basic conversational. So, like, I could go and buy clothes in France, but I'm a little bit higher in German, I think, because German is more similar to Scandinavian, which helps a lot. Yeah, it does. Yeah. But like when I speak German, I have lots of mistakes and everything, so it's not very advanced.
Right, but still a little bit higher. But that's good to know that you've kind of at least gotten something out of school, language learning, because many people, say they can't speak anything after having it for 4 or 5 years even.
Yeah, that's the thing. And, when you get really technical, it's not really many years. It's just a few hundred hours.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the latest blog posts I put up was that I took a test in the university for German, because I just started my minor degree in German, and we had to take a test, and I tested it as B1.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I was a little bit bummed out, because I was like, I thought it was better. But then I did the math, and it turns out in those 8 years that I've studied German in school, I haven't had more than 350 hours scheduled. So,
yeah.
And that kind of assumes, that I was there every class, which, I wasn't, let's be honest. So I would say around 300 hours of German. And if you kind of study a foreign language 1 hour a day for a year, I think you can get to an incredible level in most languages.
Oh, you can.
So you're really right, is that it's just so inefficient, and you don't get a lot of hours even. So that's definitely a good observation. And funny you should mention it. I literally just put it out like last week. So that's a funny coincidence. But then you went to high school, or was that?
No, I went to university after that.
University, of course, yes. And you decided, of course, on a language bachelor's degree.
Yes, and I was talking to my friend, and we decided to learn like a non-European language, and he suggested Japanese because he was into anime, and we were both into Nintendo games, and so we decided to go with Japanese. Why not?
Yeah, that's a good attitude.
Yeah, and so we did a bachelor degree in Japanese language at the University of Oslo. The classes were pretty good, and it was more intensive than, the courses in high school. So we learned a lot more. But when we went to Japan, the classes there were not very good. They were basically the teacher was just reading what was in the book.
Oh.
And so I decided to do some studying on my own. And I started, boosting my knowledge of Chinese characters by means of a book called Remembering the Kanji by James Heisig.
And just to take a step back here, when you said that the classes in Japan weren't so good, did you get opportunities to kind of immerse yourself and go out on the street to practice, or did you kind of contain yourself within your? Okay.
Yeah.
So that must have helped loads anyway, right?
Well, the thing is that when you interact with people that you don't know, it's usually very shallow.
Of course.
And I think actually your last interview with Anthony Lauder also touched upon this. Like the most interactions are very shallow. Like
exactly.
I think he used like the example of a bus ticket or something.
Yeah, and I guess also what he's talking about is that each kind of sentence doesn't really have that much information in it or important things.
And that's the thing, when we talk with friends or at least acquaintances, then we can discuss more complicated things. But with strangers, you don't usually get much beyond I'm from Norway and I've been learning Japanese this and this long.
Right.
Yeah. So of course it's a way to kind of practice what you already know, but you don't usually learn that much from it.
Right.
So you just get better at what you already can do.
Yeah, that's actually funny you say that, because that's one of the sort of internal criticisms I've had on the the fluent the speak from day one concept.
Yes.
Because I'm like, while you can learn basic sentences to go out and use them, just speaking to people won't really, it will help you, but you're using what you already know.
Yeah, that's the thing.
If somebody tells you a word that you don't know, then you're not learning it on the street. Then you're learning it if you go back and look it up, or you put it into your deck, or however many methods you have to use for it. But that's what I always saw as the criticism. And something like, Moses McCormick is doing, he's running around Walmarts, and he rarely uses sentences that are beyond his program. He uses the same sentences all the time, and it's fantastic. I really envy him for all the work that he's doing. But when you have this kind of a thing, you really need to couple it with desk time, I feel like, to really.
I think so too.
You can't just go out and talk all the time, even though that's fantastic and that it helps you improve. You can't just you can't just go out and talk, I feel like. So I definitely agree with you on that.
And you can learn some things, but the thing is that compared to learning on your own and then practicing it, it's so inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
So sure, you can pick up a word here and a sentence pattern there, but when it comes down to it, you will be using what you already know. Yeah.
I totally agree. And speaking of characters, that's something that a lot of people get scared of when they turn to the Asian languages.
Yes.
Were you given any kind of tips or special strategies by the teachers, or that this book that you picked up would be helpful, or is it just go home and memorize it kind of thing?
It was in the beginning, she would explain some of the etymology of some basic characters.
Right.
But eventually it was just, learn these characters. So I was kind of taken aback when I realized that some of the characters that I was having problems with, like, for example, the character for new, that this character was actually composed of smaller characters that I also knew.
Oh.
And that revelation made me very susceptible to this book that I mentioned, that I found online.
The title of it, so people can look it up if they're interested in learning characters.
Yes. It's by James Heisig, and it's called Remembering the Kanji.
Right.
Kanji is Chinese character in Japanese.
Right. And he has I think, a lot of magical tricks or tips that makes it easier.
Basically, his book is a list of characters going from very simple ones and then building upon the knowledge that you already have, introducing more and more complex ones. And although normally characters are said to be composed of radicals, which is not wrong, but it's the thing with Heisig is that he takes the characters and he uses all the parts. He will split the radicals into simpler pieces, and he calls them primitives. Mm-hmm. And some shapes of characters don't have a radical associated with them, but he just makes something up, basically.
Right.
So all to make you remember it better. Sounds
pretty ingenious, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah. I think it's a really good thing, and I know not everybody likes it, but I always recommend trying it.
And how many characters would a book like that get you through if you kind of studied it meticulously?
Let's see. The first book, I didn't use the third book, by the way. I only used the first one, mm-hmm. And the second one is kind of different. It's just for readings, but so I only used the first one.
Yeah.
And it goes through all of the so-called Joyo Kanji, general use characters, that are prescribed by the Japanese government.
Uh-huh.
And they amount to about 2,000.
Right, so there's kind of like a frequency list of the 90th percentile or something.
Well, yes, you can say that. Not all of them are frequent, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the strange thing. There are characters that are not in this list that are more frequent than some characters that are in this list.
Okay. But he didn't choose the list, did he? What was that?
No, he just did the whole Joyo Kanji list.
So it's the government, the local government that's decided this is what you need to know, basically.
Yeah, it's what you learn in school.
Ah.
So yeah, and
so 2,000 characters is a good kind of level to be at if you have anything to aim for as a beginner.
Yes, and if you learn some more characters, like for example commonly used name characters, then you might get to about 3,000 or something like that.
Sure.
And I think if you do all of Heisig's books, you will get to like 3,000 or so. But I did the first one, and then I discovered the goldlist method.
Right. And that's let's talk about that, actually, because I know a lot of people are interested in new methods, and particularly when it comes to vocabulary.
Yes.
So if you could just take, a minute or so, however long you need to describe how you would do a gold list for, let's say, Chinese characters or something.
Okay. I actually did take a whole year off from normal language learning just to learn more Chinese characters.
Wow. That's dedication.
Yes. And I really missed normal language learning that year. But I did accidentally learn Cantonese that way.
That's good.
Because I was learning the characters with the Mandarin and Cantonese pronunciation.
Wow.
And actually, since I realized that it's easier to convert from Cantonese to Mandarin than the other way around, I emphasized the Cantonese pronunciation more. So by the end of the year, I could speak Cantonese because I had already studied some Mandarin.
Yeah.
And so I could just talk Cantonese with Mandarin grammar and vocabulary. And gradually I would learn more Cantonese words.
Of course. So what would you start out doing? Let's say you want to learn these 2,000 characters. What's the first step? Okay, so the first step that I would do now would be to adapt the goldlist method, actually, by so that I, instead of doing like 25 lines, I would do, for example, 3 paragraphs, because Heisig introduces some stories to remember the characters. Uh-huh.
And so I might just do a paragraph for each character and then shorten the paragraph after 2 weeks, because after 2 weeks, if you still know it, then probably it's in your long-term memory. But if it's not, then you should write it again.
Right.
But what I did for the Chinese character project was to just pretend that each character was a word. And I would split it usually up to 3 lines, unless the Mandarin pronunciation was obvious from the Cantonese one. And so I would do, the first line would be the Cantonese pronunciation. Like I would write the character, and then I like putting like a long line, and then the pronunciation, and then the next line would have the character, a line, and the Mandarin pronunciation, and then the third line would have the character and the meaning. And I would do that for I think it got to 4,000 characters or so.
You did 4,000 characters by hand in a year?
Yes. So I was kind of busy.
That's a lot of work, yeah. But for people who are a little bit less ambitious, maybe to start with 2,000.
Yes, but I wouldn't do it this way if I were to start over now. But
what would you do differently?
I would do Heisig with up to maybe 2,000, but I might stop at just 1,000. Okay. Because when I did Heisig, I accidentally deleted my flashcard deck.
Yeah.
So I kind of stopped. But at that point, I had already committed around 1,000 characters to memory. And so it was not difficult to pick up new ones. No. Although, of course, you still need to learn them. So I decided to just do words. I would just take the word list in my book and gold list it. So I would put one word, and I would actually in the beginning I put the pronunciation in Japanese and the meaning together with the characters on one line.
Wow.
which is basically 2 words per line.
Right, and that's when it gets a little cramped, maybe.
Yes, and so I would remember half a line here and half a line there, and I decided that I could either give up or I could just, make it easier and just split them over 2 lines. So I decided to go for the latter.
That sounds like a pretty good idea. I don't like giving up in anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So you write these 25 or so characters down, and then what's the next step?
Then what I do is that I check for mistakes. I just read through it and check that everything is right, and then I wait for at least 2 weeks. Although in the meantime I can do more pages. It's just I don't do the same page until 2 weeks have passed. So my record for one day is 500 lines, but I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, that is dusk till dawn, I suppose, or the other way around.
Yeah, well, I usually try to avoid doing it when I'm really tired.
Right.
So it was dawn to dusk.
Okay.
But normally I will aim for maybe 2 pages or 4 pages or something like that. Then I wait for at least 2 weeks before I look at it again. And after 2 weeks, I can, I mark the ones that I know best, and I aim for 30%. So I try to, for every word I ask myself, do I know this well enough to cross it off and never see it again?
Mm-hmm.
And then I try to do that for at least 8.
But how do you know that exactly? Is it because that if you remember something after 2 weeks, is it then committed to memory definitely, or?
Well, the thing is that the assumption is that, you won't forget them again, because probably you will have forgotten them after 2 weeks if you didn't already commit them to long-term memory.
Right.
But of course, you can't know that for every word.
No.
But
you forget words in Norwegian as well, presumably.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, one time I was talking to my friend and was like, "I hope they have enough, these things that you sit on." And he was like, chairs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, and that was in Norwegian, so.
Yeah,
but
I tried that as well. Yeah.
But the thing is, if I had seen the word chair written somewhere, I would never have, wondered, oh, what's that again?
Right.
And that's the thing here too, because
it's about recall as well.
Yes, because you can easily recall a word when you see it written or even hear it spoken, but you might not be able to, spontaneously think of it.
No.
And that's kind of the idea behind the Goldlist method, that you should, expand your vocabulary, and you should do it so that you emphasize the long-term memory. Because if you want to learn lots of languages, you can't keep all of them active at the same time.
No.
And so you acquire vocabulary in many languages. For example, let's say you want to learn them really well and you learn 15,000 words per language. And then once you've learned 10 languages, you have a busy job and you have a family because you're grown up by then,
Yeah. And
you're really busy, but you still have the vocabulary, so you can still read all 10 of the languages, but once you have to speak them, maybe you'll be very slow in the beginning, and then after a few days of speaking them, you will be up to speed again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the reason why I really like this method.
That's pretty cool. So it's kind of like dormant memory.
Yeah, sort of. You could say that. It's like you have a treasure chest and you just bring it out when you need money.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I tried this.
Yeah.
And I did it for Russian, and I like to try new methods because, first of all, it's exciting to try new things. And secondly, I'm always interested in, testing what's out there for so people can at least get one opinion on it. And the thing that I found was that I was lacking the patience to do the writing itself. And I wasn't really lacking the patience to do it. It's only 25 words. Or, I suppose you should probably do more than 25 in a day, to be honest.
Well,
it only takes about 15, 20 minutes. So you should probably do more than 25 if you're serious about your language. But what I just realized is that, 15, 20 minutes for me was just too much mentally to set aside. And I didn't have the patience to just get it done. And for me, even though the method definitely works, I can definitely see, I wasn't remembering quite 30% in the beginning because of, Russian and sounding very unfamiliar, and I couldn't really pronounce the words without help from a website. So it is difficult for a language that's very foreign. But if I'd done it on German or Italian or something where the vocabulary is quite similar, then I'm sure I would have remembered at least 30%. So the system works. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. But I just want to emphasize that no method is kind of like that works for everyone. You have to really test it out. And it works great for you. And I saw one of your books in Berlin, one of the, a bronze book, I think, maybe.
Yes. They're kind of divided into bronze book being the first one, and then silver book, and then gold book, because, you get maybe 4 lists, like each list of 25 will become 4 lists in each book, kind of. Mm-hmm. So once you do 4 lists, you select from several lists and put them into a new book in exactly the same way.
Exactly. You can imagine how the first list is down to 1 or 2 words, and then you put it over in a new book or something.
Yeah, it usually is like 9, but yeah.
Well, you must step up your game then. No.
Oh, okay.
No, I know what you mean. But I'm thinking about going from silver to gold, wouldn't you? Oh, because you compose it of different bronze ones, you still have 9. But it gets harder and harder, I suppose. The words that you continually don't remember are the ones that you're left with.
But actually, the thing is, although those are kind of the difficult words, the fact is that actually it gets easier because you've seen them so many times.
Right.
So like maybe the first couple of distillations, which is what I call it when I remove the ones I know best. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not really my word. It's David James invented the method and all the vocabulary to go with it. But what I like, the first couple ones are usually the hardest ones, and then it gets all downhill from there. Well, uphill. It gets better.
It gets better. Yeah, I think that that idiom is changing, at least in Denmark.
Yeah.
I never really understood it anyway, because for me, when something is uphill, it's really hard.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But I think people in Denmark say it when they think that uphill is positive, like something is, going upwards, as in becoming better.
Yeah, and like downhill would be easier, but it's like you don't want stuff to go downhill.
No, particularly not a ship or an airplane.
That's the thing.
I wouldn't want I wouldn't want the stewardess to say it's going downhill now.
Yeah, exactly.
but still, it's a different ambiguity with that idiom.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you got the Japanese, you got the Cantonese, the Mandarin, and then I suppose the next step would be Korean, maybe.
Yes. I'm writing my thesis on Korean vowels now.
Right, and that sounds but that sounds a little bit dry. Not. Yeah.
Well, it's not. Maybe it's not the most interesting thing, but it's it's something that I'm interested in, and
of course.
It was actually, to be honest, it was the reason I selected this was partly because it was interesting, but also because I wanted an excuse to learn Korean.
Right, and you did that then.
Yes, so I've learned about 3,000 words of Korean, and I went to Korea, to Seoul and Pyongyang, and I can speak some basic Korean, but it's not nothing impressive or anything. It's just very basic.
Well, with 3,000 words, you probably just need more practice using them.
Possibly.
I mean, that's a lot of words, I would say.
But actually, I must admit that I relied way too much on Japanese in that project, because I thought that I could just learn the words and then I could worry about grammar later, because it was probably going to be the same as Japanese grammar anyway. But, I must admit that I should have paid more attention to grammar while doing it.
Yeah, actually, that's probably a pretty good tip to just emphasize there, because, words it's good to know words. But yeah. I feel like that I've been doing exactly the same for my Russian. Most of my Russian studies have been revolving around flashcarding or doing any kind of like word remembering.
Yeah.
And the grammar that I've done has been kind of sporadic, just kind of reading through the grammar book and doing some basic exercises and stuff. But if I'd done, let's say, half and half or something, which you probably need to do for a period of time, then I think I would be more confident in my grammar use. So maybe that's a little kind of a top tip there, where don't just put all your focus on the acquisition of words, because words are useless if you don't know how to connect them.
Well, they are useful but unimpressive if you don't know how to connect them.
Yeah, right. So. If you went on like name as many words as possible quiz show somewhere, then they would be useful. But usually,
well, you can still like order food, like if you know the name of the dish, even though you can just say potatoes,
right,
for example. And if you want potatoes, then no problem.
Right, that's great. But
it's not impressive at all,
Right, exactly. And I think I see a lot of people focus a lot on vocabulary. On Memrise, there's like leaderboards. And I've added a lot of people from the community that I know, some of my friends from Berlin and stuff. And I see some of them, they just do, obviously they get addicted to the game element as well. But I mean, some of them are doing like 8 or 10 languages, and they're doing it like a few hours a day.
Yeah.
Just doing words. And it's like, I think it's very inspiring, because obviously I don't do that, so I feel a little bit guilty. But on the other hand, I really hope that they also take some time to learn some other parts of the language.
Yeah, because like words are definitely the biggest part, because there are thousands of words. But you need the grammar too, because otherwise you won't know how to use the words and how to combine them and into sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's better to, like, if you have a course book, for example, what I would do is to go through the course book like in order and just go list vocabulary and grammar rules, at the same time.
Right. Have you tried using the goal list for grammar?
Oh, yes. I was studying a little bit of ancient Greek in university.
Yeah.
And just a very small thing. But what I found was that in the beginning I only did words, but then I couldn't read anything because I didn't know how the words were working. So I had to kind of switch over to both grammar and vocabulary at the same time.
That's cool.
And eventually you will run out of grammar anyway. So
sure. I mean, that's the beauty of languages, is that the grammar is a finite kind of beast. There's barriers of entry into the grammar, whereas you can add new words to the language. And I don't even know how many words there are in a language. I mean, in English, I have no idea. I guess.
Yeah. Let's see.
40,
English.
50,000 maybe. I don't know.
No, the biggest dictionary that I know about, I think it's like the Oxford English Dictionary or something.
Yeah.
It has well over 100,000 entries. But keep in mind that this is also, it's like, sure, they are English words, but most English speakers don't know them.
Right. Yeah, but that's the point. That's exactly the point, that there's maybe it's possible to memorize 100,000 words in one language.
Oh, it is.
Well,
but it's not very useful.
Right, exactly. That's the point. But it's very useful to take the limited time, I would say, that it takes to learn the grammar rules.
Yes.
Like, my grammar book only has 30 chapters, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, obviously some chapters have more than one rule, but that's a very, I would say, a very controlled number. That's very easy to look at and say, okay, 30 chapters, 30 days, a chapter a day, and then kind of gold list or put into Anki the important things that you need to memorize.
Yeah.
Because obviously a lot of the chapters are just describing the rules. They're not the rules themselves.
Yeah.
So, you can, if you do that, then I think you have a winner. Maybe.
Yeah, I think so too, because the grammar being finite, as you say, you can always find exceptions and you can always find strange things that you could argue is grammar, but you can cover the main aspects of the grammar in a very short span of time.
Right.
Even for very grammatically heavy languages like Greek, for example. I came just from Chinese, which has very, very simple grammar.
Right, I've heard about that.
Yeah, to Greek,
Yeah, I went from Danish, English, and German to Russian, so.
Yeah, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
It's a bit of a leap, but the beauty of the heavy grammar languages like Russian is that the rules are very fixed. There are very few exceptions. Like literally, when you read a rule, for instance, I think it was the instrumental case or something. There was literally 4 exceptions to one of the rules. 4 words that were exceptions to the rule. And the same with, genders. In German, the genders have tons of different rules, and you can use like rules of thumb to indicate a gender in German. But there are so many exceptions. And in Danish and Norwegian, I guess it's even worse because it just seems completely arbitrary. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. It's just like, we've decided this should be A and this should be B.
But it is like this, But it also varies a bit, because in Old Norse there was rhyme and reason to it. Not all of the time, of course, but for example, if something ended in a noun ending in a, then you would know automatically that it was feminine, because
That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. Because there was only less than 10 exceptions to this rule.
There you go. What happened, man? What happened to our language?
Yeah, but the thing is, in my dialect, it still works.
Really?
Yeah, because in Denmark, you don't have the I ending anymore, so that rule doesn't help. But in Sweden, there is still the I ending, and this works, although they don't have the feminine anymore, but you can still tell that it's common,
Right. Yeah.
And in the west of Norway, we also have so we can know this.
So you have more. So Denmark is basically just screwed. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Denmark and Eastern Norway, it's...
Yeah, what do we do? Because so many people ask me about learning Danish, and they tell me, how do I know if it's in or it, either the common gender or the neuter gender? And I just say, there's no way to know. You just need to learn.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Yeah, but
you just have to learn it.
It's so stupid, isn't it? Why don't we just get one gender like English and just don't worry about it?
Well, you could do that, but you would kind of lose out on a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, but it's funny, isn't it? Because Old Danish used to have 3. We used to have 3.
Yeah.
Like the other Scandinavian languages. And it doesn't seem to me that getting rid of one of them is a particularly good solution. It only seems to make it worse.
Well, Sweden also has at least standard Swedish. I am not so good at dialects around in Sweden, but standard Swedish has 2 genders like Danish.
Right.
And they have both the old A endings and the E endings,
Yeah.
So if something ends in A in Swedish, you will know that it's either one of the exceptions, of which there are less than 10, and all of the exceptions are neuter. Mm-hmm. Or, if it's not one of the exceptions, it will be common.
Right.
So Danish would be less screwed if you just said kept the A ending.
Right. But the problem I guess I have with it is that it doesn't change the understanding. You know what I mean? It's like when you have Russian, for instance, if I said an English sentence with the Russian grammar, then I could say book Victor's. That would be Victor would be in the genitive because that's the owner of the book. Or is it the book that's in genitive? No matter. You understand what I'm saying. But in Danish, it's the order of words that dictate who is in what position. Like the subject comes first, the nominative, and then you have the verb and then the object.
Yeah, that's the common sentence pattern. Yeah,
right. That's the order we have, and if we don't follow this order, and of course then we have the direct object at the end. The indirect object at the end, before the direct object.
No, wait.
Getting a little confused.
Well, the thing is, you have many constructions, but the very basic construction of a sentence with what we call a transitive verb,
right?
Is subject, verb, object. And then you can have one construction that has the indirect object at the end. I think in Danish you would also say I give a book to Chris.
Yeah, that's correct.
And you can also say I give Chris a book. Right. Yeah, so both of them work.
But you need a preposition for the if you need to put it at the end though.
Yes.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, it's it's very interesting, and I can only. I mean, this is why I would get into linguistics. Would be to look at these kind of sentence patterns and sentence construction. I find that very interesting.
It is interesting,
and that makes
although I still prefer sounds.
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, that's your cup of tea, obviously, but yeah, and it's been a great pleasure, and you know what? I'm so happy that we actually managed to get this episode recorded after so much trouble. But here in the last minute or two, can you give any kind of so many people want to learn Asian languages, and we already gave some tips on the characters, but can you give any kind of tips to how to attack learning, let's say something like Mandarin, if you don't know anything about it? What's kind of some of the secrets that you've discovered through learning it?
Well, for Mandarin, it has a very simple grammar. So obviously you still need to learn the simple grammar, but it won't take so long. So the main difficulty lies in obviously the characters, although you can get away with not learning them if you want to.
Sure.
But the main difficulty will be in pronunciation. So if you know some phonetics, then it will be much easier.
Okay.
Even if you know phonetics, you might have trouble with tones, for example. But
right. So what would be the best mode of attack to learn tones if you're not familiar with any tonal language.
Actually, what I like to do is to use prat. It's Dutch for I think you can say prat in Danish.
No.
No? Okay. It's a phonetic program. So you can take any audio file and open it in prat, and then you can set it to display tones.
Oh, so you see the wavelength or the
you see what we call a spectrogram. So you can see if you're used to reading it, then you can see, okay, here is a fricative, here is a vowel.
Oh wow!
And so on.
Is that what that's what you really like doing then at the?
Yes, so this is the program I use for my thesis because I can set it to display vowel formants, so I can kind of read the vowels from the thing, and I can extract the exact values from the program.
That's pretty cool, actually.
And the really cool thing in discussing Mandarin, for example, if you want to learn tones, you can set it to just display tones, and then you can see tones going up, tones going down, tones going straight.
Right, and up and down.
Yeah, all of this stuff. So you can just open a Chinese sound file, for example, in there, and you can see where the tones are going, and then you can record yourself and analyze it in the program. Yeah, exactly. So you can just practice getting the tones.
Right, because the thing about tones that I haven't studied much Chinese at all, but what I'm really fascinated by is, if you give me a Chinese word and tell me the tone, I can kind of work towards that, like wa, it goes down, then it goes up. I don't know how correct that was, but just for the sake of argument,
that sounded fine to me.
let's say it was correct for the sake of argument. But when people speak in Chinese in a very fluid setting, damn, it's fast.
Yes, and
how do you get the tones in so little airspace? That seems incredible.
Well, actually, when you are speaking fast, you don't pronounce the tones like you do in isolation. You're kind of still aiming towards the general shape of them, but you're not making them as what do you say, right. Perfect. So if you do full tones when you're speaking fast, then it sounds strange. For example, the third tone, it's usually described as a dipping tone, like wa, but normally you wouldn't pronounce it like that because it would sound really, really strange.
It takes time to do in each word then.
Yeah, and it sounds really unnatural if you do that. But if you instead just pronounce it as a very low tone, then it sounds much more natural.
Right.
Yeah.
And they teach this presumably in Chinese courses, or do they just stick to the textbook?
No. I think they teach it. Actually, my Chinese textbook was talking about this. Okay. So yeah, it's.
That's good to know, because for a beginner like me, it does seem a little bit challenging. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, it was to me too. Don't worry.
And then, of course, Cantonese has a few more, right?
Yeah, so Cantonese is like 6 contrasting tones, and is usually said to have more. And also, it can depend on where you're from too, because I have a friend from Guangzhou in southern China.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's a very big technological place.
Oh yeah,
they produce a lot of the world's electronics.
Oh, is that Shenzhen?
Yeah, they do as well. But what was the first one you said?
Guangzhou or Guangzhou?
Right. Yes.
Depending on whether you're saying the Mandarin name or the Cantonese one.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, but I have a friend from there who pronounces, who also has 7th tone.
Oh wow.
Because I'm not exactly sure if there are rules for when to use which, but basically it's the old first tone that has kind of split into 2.
Right.
So you have one high tone, like for example, tang, and then you have one falling tone, for example, how. So the first time I talked to her in person, I was kind of surprised when she said instead of, for example, how yo, She said, "How yo?"
Right, and
So,
and
I was like,
and
is there a falling tone in Cantonese?
and if people don't really see the difference between the two things you just said, then that will come when you get into learning it more, I suppose.
Oh yes, it's in the beginning it's hard to hear the difference, and sometimes if people say words in isolations, I still have trouble, hearing the exact tones.
Right.
So I'm not claiming to be an expert or anything.
No. Well, thank you for being in the hot seat anyway. But I mean, is it there are words where the tone defines the meaning. So obviously then it's really important with tones. But are there many of these, or is it, is it dangerous to say the wrong tone, I guess is my question.
It can be, but usually it's very clear what you mean anyway, because most words have more than one syllable, mm-hmm. and that already reduces the amount of homophones. But you do still have lots of homophones. So let's see. Can I think of some?
I heard the one from ma.
Yes. But I think usually they say mama. I forgot which order it is, but it's like a sentence that means my mother scolds the horse or something. But like most of these words, like ma on its own is usually not used. So you would have mama, for example.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Meaning mother.
Oh.
And horse on its own is ma, but
so mother and horse could be the same.
No. Well, they have different tones.
Right, different tones, yeah, but same letters, or in pinyin anyway.
Yeah.
But Victor, we could talk about Chinese pronunciation for weeks, I suppose, and I just want to round it off before we drift off into the wonders of Chinese too much, and thank you for your insights and for coming on the show and having the patience to complete it. I mean, this has been a pleasure as always, and all of the interviews have been a pleasure for me with you, even though we had to redo it a few times. But thank you so much for coming, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at least in Berlin next year. I'm assuming you're coming, and we can have.
Yes. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast. For more information, be sure to check out actualfluency.com. Until next time, enjoy learning.